The fleet should have won in the first minute. That was the first thing Fleet Commander Rawl understood. And the second thing, the thing that settled slowly into his mind like a cold weight, was that they already hadn't. The Tarsan Coalition fleet consisted of 21 warships. Not patrol craft, not escorts, warships. Each one capable of leveling a planetary city in under 12 minutes. Each one carrying weapons calibrated to tear through shields, armor, and anything foolish enough to rely on either. They had surrounded a single vessel, a human vessel, dead in space. "Status," Raw said. His voice carried the calm of someone who had never needed to raise it. Not once in 32 engagements, not once in 12 successful campaigns. "Target remains stationary," said Officer Kell. "Thermal output minimal. Engines offline. No shield signature." A pause. Then, "Sir, it's not responding." Rawl leaned slightly forward. On the central display, the ship rotated slowly, drifting, silent, broken. Designation, HSF Resilience. Classification, Adaptive Combat Cruiser. Age, 17 years. 17 years. Ancient, obsolete. By coalition standards, the vessel should have been scrapped, recycled, forgotten. Instead, it had destroyed 4 coalition scouts before going dark. "Damage report?" Rawl asked. Kell hesitated. That was new. Kell did not hesitate. "Direct hits confirmed," Kell said slowly. 72 plasma lance strikes. Another pause. "And counting prior engagements, total recorded damage exceeds survivability projections by 340%. Rawl turned his head, slowly. "Explain." Kell swallowed. "I can't, sir." Silence. Rawl looked back at the ship. The hull was scarred, blackened, cratered, but intact. Integrity? 58%. That number sat wrong in a way numbers should not be. "Recheck." "I already did." Rawl stood, walked closer to the display, studied the damage patterns. 72 direct hits, and still operational structure. That wasn't resilience, that was defiance. "Open a channel." Static, for 3 seconds. 4. Then, a voice. Calm, measured, not strained, not desperate. "Coalition Command," the voice said. "You took your time." Rawl narrowed his eyes. "Identify yourself." "Captain Elias Varn." A pause. "Commanding Officer of the Resilience." Rawl glanced at the data file. Yes, that name. Decorated, unpredictable, multiple anomalies. "You are disabled, outnumbered, outgunned, surrounded." A beat. Surrender. Silence. Then, a soft exhale, almost amused. "You always open with that," Varn said. Rawl did not react. "You're finished," Rawl continued. "There is no tactical scenario where you survive this." Another pause, longer this time. "I can think of one," Varn said. Rawl's fingers tightened behind his back. "Enlighten me." "Leave," Varn said. "Take your fleet. Exit this sector. Don't come back." The bridge went still. Rawl almost smiled. Almost. "You misunderstand your position." "No," Varn said quietly. "You misunderstand mine." At that exact moment, Officer Kell made a sound. Not a word, a sound. "Commander." Rawl turned. "What?" Kell's voice dropped. "The ship is changing." Rawl's gaze snapped to the display. The Resilience moved. Not fast, not evasive, just alive. "Engine signatures rising," Cal said. "All systems coming online." "That's impossible," someone whispered. "Yes," Rawl said quietly. "It is."
And yet, the ship rotated, stabilized, faced them. The damage looked different. Not repaired, not gone, but less. Zoom, Rawl ordered. The display magnified the hull. Crater edges, smoother, shallower. "What am I looking at?" Rawl asked. Cal didn't answer immediately. "Sir, the damage is reducing." Silence fell, heavy, uncomfortable. "That's not how matter works," said Tactical Officer Drin. "No," Rawl said, "it isn't." On the open channel, Varn's voice returned. "I'll give you one more chance," he said. "Pull back." Rawl ignored him. "Scan the hull." Kel complied, hands moving faster now. Material composition, unknown. Unknown? It's not metal, not composite, not crystalline. Kel swallowed. "I don't have a classification." Rawl felt it then, that same thing from earlier. Unease. "Energy absorption?" Kel froze. "Sir." "Say it." "Impact transfer, 12%. Drin turned. "That's not possible." "Explain," Rawl asked. Kel's voice was thin now. 88% of the energy isn't dispersing. "Then where is it going?" Silence. Then, quietly, into the ship. No one spoke. Rawl stared at the resilience. 72 strikes, and each one had made it stronger. On the channel, Varn spoke again. "You should stop shooting now." Rawl did not respond, because now he understood something. Not everything, not even close, but enough. "This vessel," Rawl said slowly, "converts damage into structural reinforcement." Kel nodded. "Yes, sir." Rawl exhaled. "We are feeding it." No one argued, because no one could. And then Varn said the one thing that changed everything. "It's not just the hull." Rawl's eyes narrowed. "What does that mean?" A pause. Measured. Deliberate. "It means," Varn said, "you haven't seen what it does with the rest." And then the resilience fired. There was no flash, no weapon signature, no charging sequence, just a ripple across the hull. And then 2 coalition warships disappeared. Not damaged, not disabled. Gone. Converted into expanding debris fields before their systems could even register the attack. "What?" Drin started. "Formation break," someone shouted. The fleet scattered, instinctively, because there was nothing to target, nothing to track. The attack had come from everywhere. Rawl gripped the command rail. "Report. Unknown weapon. Energy origin. Everywhere. No emitter. No focal point." Kel turned, face pale. "Sir, the hull fired." Silence. The hull, the same structure that absorbed the damage, had released it, directed, controlled, weaponized. Rawl looked back at the resilience. It hadn't moved. It didn't need to. On the channel, Varn's voice returned. "Now you understand," he said. Rawl said nothing, because now he did. And that was the problem. Because if what he understood was true, then the worst possible thing he could do was attack again. And every instinct he had, every doctrine, every rule of war told him to do exactly that.
Fleet Commander Rawl did something he had not done in 12 years of command. He hesitated. Not outwardly, not in a way his officers could see. His posture remained straight. His voice, when he used it, would still carry authority. But inside, there was a delay, a fraction of a second between instinct and decision. Because instinct said, destroy it. And logic, what little of it he had, was beginning to suggest something else entirely. Hold fire, Rawl said, quietly. The bridge went still. Tactical Officer Drin turned sharply. Commander? That was not a suggestion, Rawl replied.
Drin closed his mouth. Across the fleet, weapons cooled. Targeting systems remained locked, but no one fired. On the central display, the human ship floated, silent, waiting, as if it had expected this. Of course it had. "Scan everything," Rawl said. "I want full spectrum analysis, structure, energy flow, internal systems, everything." Officer Kell nodded quickly, already working. Seconds passed, then minutes. No one spoke, because everyone on that bridge understood one thing now. They were no longer observing a damaged enemy vessel. They were studying a problem, and they did not yet understand the rules. "Commander," Kell said finally. Rawl didn't turn. "Report." Kell hesitated, then forced the words out. "The energy we transferred into the hull," he swallowed. "It's not just stored." Rawl's eyes narrowed. "Clarify." Kell expanded the display. A complex lattice appeared. Not mechanical, not structural in any traditional sense. Something else. "It's moving," Kell said. "Energy moves," Drin snapped. "No," Kell said, shaking his head. "Not like this." He zoomed further. The lattice shifted, reconfigured. "It's reorganizing itself," Kell said quietly. Silence. Rawl stepped closer. "What determines the pattern?" Kell's fingers moved across the console. "I don't know." That answer again. Rawl didn't like it the first time. He liked it even less now. "Find out." Kell nodded. "Yes, sir." Across the bridge, Science Officer Viral, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke. "This is adaptive structuring." All eyes turned. Rawl looked at him. "Explain." Viral stepped forward slowly. "As energy enters the hull, it isn't simply absorbed. It is analyzed." Drin frowned. "Analyzed by what?" Viral didn't answer immediately, because he didn't have one. "Continue," Rawl said. Viral exhaled. "The structure changes in response to the type, intensity, and frequency of incoming energy." Kell nodded. "Yes, that matches the readings." Rawl folded his hands behind his back. "So every shot we fire teaches it," Viral finished. The word landed heavily. Teaches, not strengthens, not reinforces. Learns. Rawl turned back to the display. The resilience drifted slightly, then stabilized again, as if adjusting, as if thinking. "No," Drin said. All eyes turned again. "That's not possible," Drin continued. "It's a ship, not an intelligence." Viral tilted his head slightly. "Are you certain those are different things?" Silence. Rawl did not interrupt, because now he was remembering something. A report, dismissed months ago. Human experimental systems, self-optimizing combat frameworks. At the time, it had seemed inefficient, unpredictable. Now, it seemed like this. "Commander," Kell said. Rawl snapped back. "What?" Kell zoomed in on the energy lattice again. "It's not just adapting to damage." Rawl stared. "Show me." Kell isolated two data sets. Before the first volley, after the 70-second strike. The difference was clear. Not just denser, smarter. Energy pathways, more efficient. Distribution nodes, more organized. "This isn't reinforcement," Kell said. "No," Viral agreed quietly. "It's optimization." The word hung in the air. Rawl felt the unease return, stronger now, sharper. "How long," he asked, "before it stops improving?" No one answered, because no one knew. On the open channel, Captain Varn's voice returned. "You're starting to see it." Rawl didn't look away from the display. "You designed this." A pause. "No," Varn said. That answer was worse. "Then who designed it?" Another pause, longer time. "We didn't design it." Rawl's eyes narrowed. "We built the first version." Silence. Then quietly, "It designed the rest." No one on the bridge moved, because suddenly, this wasn't a weapon anymore. It was something else, something that improved itself, under fire. Rawl felt the decision forming, slow, heavy, and dangerous. "Commander," Drin said carefully, "we cannot allow this system to continue evolving." Rawl nodded once. "Yes, that means we must destroy it immediately." Rawl didn't respond, because now he understood something Drin didn't. Every attempt to destroy it was making it harder to destroy. "Options," Rawl said. Cal answered first. "If we withdraw, it survives." Drin, "If we attack, it improves." Viral, "If we wait, it studies us." Silence. Rawl exhaled slowly. Every path was wrong, which meant he needed a different kind of answer. "What happens," Rawl said, "if we exceed its capacity?" Kel froze. Viral turned. Drin leaned forward. "Overload?" Drin said. Rawl nodded. "Yes." Kel's hands moved rapidly, simulations running, calculations stacking. Seconds stretched. Then, "It might work," Kel said. Drin's eyes lit. "Explain." Kel brought up the projection. "If the energy input exceeds its ability to process and redistribute, it collapses?" Drin finished. Viral shook his head slightly. "Or it evolves again." Rawl looked at him. "Everything has a limit." Viral met his gaze. "Yes," he said. A pause. "But we don't know what this one is." Rawl turned back to the display. The resilience. Waiting. Not fleeing, not attacking. Letting them decide. That, more than anything, felt wrong. Because it meant it wasn't reacting anymore. It was allowing. Rawl straightened. Decision made. "All ships," he said. "Across 21 warships, command channels opened. We will execute a full-spectrum saturation strike." Silence. Even Drin hesitated. "Commander," Rawl didn't look at him, "we will exceed its threshold." Kel's voice was quiet. "And if we don't?" Rawl's answer came without hesitation. "Then we learn something." On the open channel, Varn spoke again. "You're going to try to break it." Rawl didn't deny it. "Yes." A pause. Then, something unexpected. Varn laughed. Not loudly, not mockingly, just tired. "I was hoping you'd say that." Rawl felt something shift again. "What does that mean?" Silence. Then, "It means," Varn said, "you're about to give me exactly what I need." Rawl's jaw tightened. "All ships," he ordered, "prepare to fire." Across the void, 21 warships aligned, weapons charging, energy building, a storm about to be unleashed. On the display, the resilience did not move. It did not raise shields. It did not evade. It simply waited. And for the first time, Fleet Commander Rawl realized this was not a battle. It was a test, and he had just agreed to take it.
There is a moment in every battle where outcome stops being theory and becomes irreversible. Fleet Commander Rawl recognized that moment. It was the silence before 21 warships fired as one. "All ships," he said, voice steady, controlled. "On my mark." Across the coalition formation, weapons reached peak charge. Plasma lances, graviton drivers, thermal collapse arrays. Enough firepower to erase continents. All of it aimed at a single human cruiser, the Resilience. On the display, it did not move. It did not raise shields. It did not run. It waited. Rawl's eyes narrowed. Mark. The void lit up. 21 warships fired simultaneously, not in sequence, not in waves, all at once. A convergence of energy so dense that space itself seemed to distort around it. The beams struck. Every section of the Resilience's hull at the same time. There was no angle to deflect, no delay to compensate. It was perfect execution. It was also exactly what the ship needed. The impact swallowed the vessel in light. Sensors flared, readings spiked. "Contact confirmed. Energy transfer off the charts." Kell's voice broke through, strained. "Commander, this is exceeding all previous input levels." "Hold readings," Rawls said. His eyes never left the display. The light began to fade, slowly, deliberately, as if something inside it was deciding how fast to let it go. And then the resilience appeared again. Hull integrity, 41%. Drin exhaled sharply. "We did it," he said. But Kell didn't respond because he was still watching the numbers. "Wait," Kell whispered. Rawls' gaze sharpened. "What?" Kell swallowed. "It's not collapsing." The hull shifted, not repairing, not regenerating, changing. The damage compressed inward. The craters tightened. The entire structure densified, as if the ship had taken the violence and folded it into itself. "Energy levels?" Rawls demanded. Kell stared at the readout. Then, very quietly, 91% capacity. Silence. Complete, utter silence. Drin shook his head. "That's not possible." Viral didn't look away from the display. "It is now." Rawls felt it again, that cold realization. They hadn't overwhelmed it. They had completed it. On the open channel, Captain Varn spoke. "That helped." Rawls' jaw tightened. "You were expecting that?" "Yes." No hesitation, no denial. "Why?" Rawls demanded. A pause. Then, "Because you think like soldiers," Varn said. Rawls said nothing. "You saw something you didn't understand, and your solution was to apply maximum force." Another pause. "It's a very reliable pattern." On the bridge, no one spoke, because he wasn't right. Rawls' voice came slower now. "You needed that strike." "Yes." "How much did it give you?" A beat. Then, "Enough." That word landed harder than any weapon. Rawls turned slightly. "Status." Kell's voice was tight. "Energy distribution across the hull is stabilizing." "Stabilizing into what?" Rawls asked. Kell didn't answer, because the display answered for him. The lattice, that shifting, impossible structure, had changed again. It was no longer reactive. It was arranged, purposefully. "Commander," Viral said slowly, "I think it's ready." Rawls felt his pulse slow. "Ready for what?" No one answered, because they already knew. On the Resilience, Captain Elias Varn stood, for the first time since the battle began. "Status," he said. "Nodes at 90%, replied his engineer. "Structure stable. Routing complete." A pause. Then, "We've never pushed it this far." Varn nodded once. "I know." Another pause. "Think it'll hold?" The engineer hesitated. "Probably." Varn allowed himself the smallest smile. "Good enough." Back on the coalition flagship, Kell's voice rose. "Commander, energy distribution is spiking." Rawls stepped forward. "How fast?" "Too fast." The lattice lit up. Not like a weapon charging, like something waking up. "Defensive positions," Drin shouted. But there was nothing to target, nothing to intercept, because the energy was everywhere. Every point of the hull glowed. Every scar, every impact site became a node, a release point. Rawls' voice cut through the chaos. "Shields to maximum." Across the fleet, defenses surged, but they were built for direction, for vectors, for identifiable threats. Not this, not something that could fire from anywhere. On the channel, Varn spoke one last time. "You should have left." And then the Resilience fired. Not a beam, not a blast, a field, a wave of energy released from the entire surface of the ship simultaneously. It didn't travel, it appeared everywhere inside the coalition formation at once. 3 warships vanished instantly. Their shields never reacted, their systems never responded. They simply ceased. 5 more followed, not destroyed, but broken. Systems collapsing, power grids failing, hull integrity dropping to 0 faster than physics allowed.
"Return fire!" someone screamed, but there was nothing to aim at, because the attack had no origin, it had no direction, it had no warning. It just happened. Rawl gripped the command rail. "Report!" Kell's voice was shaking now. 8 ships lost or disabled." Drin stared at the display. "We can't fight this," Viral whispered, almost to himself. "It's not a weapon." Rawl turned. "What?" Viral's eyes were locked on the resilience. "It's a system of consequence." Silence. "Explain." Viral swallowed. "It doesn't attack. It responds." Another pause. "To everything we do." Rawl looked back at the battlefield, the debris, the broken formation, the surviving ships, scattered, afraid, and at the center of it, the resilience, unmoving, untouched, stronger than when the battle began. Kell spoke again. "Commander?" Rawl didn't look away. "What?" "Hull integrity is rising." Of course it was. "Current reading?" Kell exhaled. 76%. Drin laughed, a short, broken sound. "We hit it with everything, and it got better." No one disagreed. Rawl straightened slowly. For the first time in his entire career, he had no next move, and that, more than anything, terrified him. On the channel, Varn's voice returned, calm, measured, unchanged. "Commander Rawl," he said, "are we done teaching each other?" Rawl didn't answer immediately, because now he understood something. This wasn't over. It had never been about this battle. This ship, this system, was learning, and every second it remained, it became something new, something worse, something no one had planned for. Rawl finally spoke. "What are you?" A pause. Then, Varn answered. "We're what happens when you build something that survives war." Another pause. "And then, let it remember." Silence fell across the shattered battlefield, and in that silence, Fleet Commander Rawl realized this was only the beginning.
Fleet Commander Rawl should have ordered a retreat. Every calculation, every instinct that had kept him alive through 3 decades of war was telling him the same thing. This cannot be fought conventionally. And yet, he didn't give the order, because Rawl was not alone. High Command was listening. They had been listening since the first transmission, watching, recording, analyzing, and now they responded. The message arrived with priority override. It cut across all channels, silenced all local authority. Rawl didn't need to read the sender ID. He already knew. "Open it," he said. Kell complied. The message was short. Engagement to continue. Reinforcements en route. Objective, capture or neutralize human vessel. No hesitation, no doubt, no understanding. Drin exhaled sharply. "They want us to keep fighting that?" Rawl didn't answer, because the answer didn't matter. Orders were orders. "ETA?" Rawl asked. Kell checked. "Reinforcement fleet, 28 minutes. "How many?" Kell hesitated. 30 ships. Silence fell again. Not relief, not confidence, something else. Because everyone on that bridge understood what that meant. 30 more ships. 30 more sources of energy. 30 more mistakes. Vile spoke quietly. "They think numbers will solve it." Rawl finally turned. They always do. Vile held his gaze. This time, numbers are the problem. Rawl didn't respond because he was beginning to agree. On the central display, the resilience drifted, still, silent, as if it knew exactly what was coming. On the open channel, Captain Varn spoke again. "You called for help." Rawl didn't deny it. "Yes." A pause. "That's unfortunate." Rawl's eyes narrowed. "For you?" he asked. Varn's reply came instantly. "For them." No one spoke, because there was no arrogance in the statement, no threat, just certainty. Rawl leaned slightly forward.
You believe one ship can defeat 50? A longer pause this time. Then, I believe, Varn said, you're about to give me more than I need. The channel went quiet. Drin muttered under his breath, "He's insane." "No," Vile said softly, "he's consistent." Rawl didn't comment, because consistency was what made something dangerous. Minutes passed. The fleet reformed, loosely, carefully. No one wanted to get too close. No one wanted to fire first. For the first time, a coalition fleet was afraid to attack, and at the center of that fear, a single human ship waited. Then, Kell's voice cut through the silence. "Commander, new contacts." Rawl didn't need to ask. "Display." The screen expanded. 30 new signatures dropped out of warp. Perfect formation, perfect discipline, untouched, unaware, reinforcements. "Commander Rawl," came the voice over command channel, sharp, confident, uninformed. "Strike Admiral Karath, I am assuming command of this engagement." Rawl closed his eyes, just for a second, then opened them. "Admiral," he said carefully, "you need to listen very closely. We've reviewed your transmission logs." Of course they had. "And we've reached a conclusion." Rawl felt it coming, that same mistake again. "You engaged inefficiently, fragmented fire patterns, inconsistent pressure." Rawl said nothing, because there was no point. "We will correct that," Karath said. Vile closed his eyes. Drin muttered something that would have earned a reprimand under any other circumstances. Kell just stared at his console, because he knew what was about to happen. "Admiral," Rawl said one last time, "this ship converts energy input into weapons," Karath cut in. A pause. "Yes, we saw that." Rawl's jaw tightened. "That's not all it does." Silence. Then, dismissively, "All systems do something beyond their initial observation, Commander. That's why we apply overwhelming force." There it was, the doctrine, the mistake, given form. "We will execute a continuous saturation cycle." Kell looked up sharply. Rawl's voice dropped. "Continuous?" "Yes. Not one strike, not one overwhelming burst, but sustained, relentless, endless, exactly what the resilience was built for." "Admiral," Rawl started. "Stand down, Commander," Karath said. Cold, final. "You've done enough." The channel closed. Silence filled the bridge. Then Vile spoke. "They're going to feed it." Drin nodded slowly, non-stop. Kell whispered, "It's going to become something else." Rawl didn't move, because now he knew exactly what would happen, and he could not stop it. On the display, the reinforcement fleet spread out, perfect arcs, perfect spacing, a firing grid, around the resilience. On the open channel, Varn spoke again. "You should leave." No one answered, because no one was listening to him. "Last chance," Varn said, still calm, still measured, still giving them a choice. Karath's voice replaced him. "All ships," the Admiral ordered, "begin sustained fire." And the universe made its second mistake. The void ignited. 30 warships, joined by Rawl's remaining fleet, fired, not once, not twice, but continuously. A storm of energy, unbroken, unrelenting, crashing into the resilience from every direction. Kell's console lit up instantly. Energy intake rising, structural integrity stabilizing. "Commander, it's adapting faster than before." Of course it was. They weren't just feeding it now, they were training it. The hull glowed, not from heat, from activity. The lattice inside shifted faster, more efficiently, more precisely. "Commander," Vile whispered. Rawl didn't respond, because he was watching the transformation. Not damage, not survival, evolution. Real time, measured in seconds.
The Resilience began to move, slowly, deliberately, into the center of the firing grid. It wasn't avoiding the attacks, it was positioning itself for them. Kell's voice shook. It's optimizing intake angles. Drin stared. It's maximizing exposure. Rawl whispered, it wants more. On the channel, Varn spoke again. You really should have listened. No one did, because they couldn't, because they wouldn't, because by the time they understood, it would be too late. Kell's readings spiked. Commander, energy levels at 95%. No, 98%. Vile's voice cut in urgently. It's not just storing now. Rawl's eyes snapped to the display. What? Kell's hands froze over the console. It's not just absorbing. A pause. Then, it's changing the output pattern. Silence. Deep. Terrible. Because now they had crossed a line. This was no longer the same system, no longer the same ship. They hadn't just powered it, they had pushed it past its previous limits, and whatever it was becoming now had never existed before. On the Resilience, Captain Varn looked at the display. Status. Nodes beyond threshold. A pause. We're in unknown territory. Varn nodded. Good. Another pause. Let's see what it learned. Back on the Coalition flagship, Kell whispered, Commander. Rawl didn't look away. Yes. Kell's voice dropped to almost nothing. It's not just responding anymore. Rawl felt it before he understood it. What is it doing? Kell answered, it's anticipating. And in that moment, Fleet Commander Rawl realized they had not been fighting a weapon. They had not been fighting a ship. They had been fighting something that learned. And now it was ready to act first. The Resilience pulsed once, and the battlefield changed forever.
There are moments in history that only reveal their importance after they pass. And then there are moments where everyone present knows something irreversible has just happened. This was one of those moments. The Resilience pulsed. Not an explosion, not a discharge, a pulse, like a heartbeat. And every sensor across 51 Coalition warships lost synchronization. Report, Admiral Karaith demanded, his voice sharp, controlled, but for the first time, strained. Sensor drift across all systems, target lock instability, energy readings fluctuating. Kell's hands moved rapidly across his console. Commander, this isn't interference. Rawl didn't look away. Then what is it? Kell swallowed. It changed the environment. Silence, because that didn't make sense. Weapons affected targets. They didn't rewrite the space around them. Viral stepped forward slowly. Yes, he said quietly. Rawl turned. Explain. Viral's eyes were locked on the Resilience. It's no longer just storing and releasing energy, he said. A pause. It's controlling how that energy behaves. Drin shook his head. That's theoretical. No, Viral said. It was theoretical. On the display, the Resilience glowed, but not with heat, with structure. Patterns of light moving across its hull, not randomly, but with intention. Kell zoomed in. Commander, the lattice. Rawl stepped closer. What about it? Kell's voice dropped. It's stable. That shouldn't have been surprising, but it was, because before, the lattice had been reacting, shifting. Now, it was fixed, perfectly arranged, like a completed equation. Viral whispered, it solved something. No one asked what, because they were about to find out. Admiral, Rawl said sharply, cease fire immediately. Karaith didn't respond, because Karaith was watching the same thing and coming to the wrong conclusion. All ships, Karaith ordered, increase output. Rawl turned. Admiral, no! Maximum sustained fire. And just like that, they made it worse. Again. The fleet unleashed everything, a continuous storm of energy, stronger, brighter,
more destructive than before, but this time the resilience didn't just absorb it, it shaped it. The incoming fire bent, not visibly, not dramatically, but enough that the energy didn't strike randomly anymore. It flowed, guided, directed into specific points across the hull. Kell stared in disbelief. It's routing incoming fire. Drin turned. That's impossible. Kell shook his head. No, it's choosing where it gets hit. Silence, because that changed everything. Before, they had been feeding it. Now, it was deciding how to be fed. Ral whispered, "It's optimizing input." Viral nodded. "Yes." A pause. "And output." Ral's eyes snapped back to the display. "Admiral, pull back now!" But it was too late. The resilience pulsed again. This time, the fleet felt it. Not physically, but systemically. Targeting arrays lagged, shield harmonics desynchronized, weapon timing drifted. "Commander, our firing cycles are off." Kell's voice was rising. "It's interfering with coordination." "No," Viral said. A pause. Then, "It's predicting it." Silence, because that was worse, much worse. "It knows where we're going to fire," Drin said. "And when," Viral added. Ral's voice dropped. "Before we do." On the channel, Varn spoke again. "You should have stopped." Karaith didn't answer, because now even he understood something was wrong. "Fleet, adjust firing pattern, randomize." But the order came too late. The resilience moved, not fast, not aggressively, but precisely. Every shift, every rotation lined up with incoming fire, maximizing absorption, minimizing strain. It wasn't defending itself, it was harvesting. Kell's reading spiked again, energy beyond measurable threshold. Drin turned. "That's not possible." Kell didn't argue this time, because the numbers weren't making sense anymore. They weren't increasing, they were stabilizing at a level that shouldn't exist. Viral whispered, "It found equilibrium." Rao looked at him. "With what?" Viral didn't answer, because the answer was in front of them. The resilience wasn't just absorbing energy anymore. It was matching it, balancing it, holding it perfectly, like it had always been meant to do this, like this was its final form. "Commander," Kell said slowly. Ral didn't move. "It's not getting stronger anymore." Drin let out a breath. "Good." Kell shook his head. "No." A pause. "It doesn't need to." Silence, because now they understood. Before, it had been learning. Now, it was ready. On the resilience, Captain Varn stood at the center of the bridge. "Status? System stable, full equilibrium across all nodes." A pause. "We've never seen this state before." Varn nodded once. "Of course not." He looked at the battlefield. 51 warships, still firing, still trying, still making the same mistake. "Time to end it," he said. Back on the Coalition flagship, Ral felt it before it happened, that same instinct that had kept him alive for 30 years, screaming, "Admiral, disengage now!" Karaith opened his mouth, but never finished the order, because the resilience didn't fire, not in any way they understood. It didn't release energy, it redistributed it. Every shot, every beam, every weapon discharge was suddenly not theirs anymore. The energy turned, not back, through, across the battlefield, between ships, inside formations. Kell's reading spiked again. "Commander, our own fire is being redirected." Drin stared in horror. "That's impossible." But it was happening. Every weapon in the fleet became part of the attack. Ships struck not by the resilience, but by each other, by their own fire, by the energy they had released. 3 warships detonated instantly. 5 more followed, not because they were hit, but because they had become targets. The formation collapsed completely. Chaos replaced strategy. Panic replaced control. And at the center of it all, the resilience remained still, untouched, untouchable.
Kel's voice broke. "We're destroying ourselves." Ral didn't respond because there was nothing left to say. This wasn't a battle anymore. It was a consequence. Viral whispered. "It learned the system." A pause, and became it. On the channel, Varn spoke one last time. "This is why you don't escalate everything." Ral closed his eyes because now he understood everything. Too late. When he opened them, half the fleet was gone, the rest scattered, broken, and the resilience was still there, perfect, waiting, not for another attack, but for a decision. Ral took a slow breath, then gave the only order left. "All ships?" A pause. "Disengage." No one argued, no one hesitated, because now they finally understood. You don't fight something that gets stronger every time you try. And far behind the battlefield, unseen, unknown, other human ships were being built, learning, waiting.
The battle didn't end with an explosion. It ended with silence. 51 warships had entered the engagement. 18 remained. Of those, only 12 retained full propulsion. None retained confidence. Fleet Commander Ral stood on the bridge of a damaged flagship and understood with perfect clarity that he had just witnessed the end of a doctrine. "All ships have disengaged," Kel reported quietly. Ral nodded once. "Distance?" "Expanding. The human vessel is not pursuing." Of course it wasn't. Ral looked at the display. The resilience floated in the void, unchanged. No, that wasn't true. It wasn't unchanged. It was complete. "Commander," Viral said softly. Ral didn't look away. "Yes. I think it's letting us leave." A long pause followed, because that, more than anything, was the most unsettling part. It could have destroyed them, all of them. It had proven that, and yet it hadn't. Ral exhaled slowly. "Open a channel." Kel hesitated, then complied. Static. Then, "Commander Ral," came Captain Varn's voice, still calm, still steady, as if nothing had changed. Everything had. Ral spoke carefully. "You could have finished this." A pause. "Yes." No arrogance, no pride, just fact. "Why didn't you?" Silence. Longer this time, measured. Then, "Because you stopped," Varn said. Ral frowned slightly. "That is not a strategic answer." "No," Varn agreed. "It's a human one." The bridge remained silent, because no one there fully understood what that meant. Ral's voice lowered. "This ship," he hesitated, because he didn't know what word to use anymore. "What is it, really?" Another pause. Then, "It's not a weapon," Varn said. Ral's eyes narrowed. "It destroyed half a fleet." "Yes." A beat. "So do your ships?" That wasn't wrong. Ral said nothing. "It's not a weapon," Varn repeated. "It's a system." "A system for what?" Ral asked. The answer came slowly. "Asking a question." Silence. Ral waited. "What question?" A pause. Then, "How far are you willing to go," Varn said, "when the cost is reflected back at you?" No one spoke, because suddenly this wasn't about technology anymore. It wasn't even about war. It was about consequence. Ral looked at the battlefield again, the debris, the silence, the absence, and for the first time he understood what he had been looking at, not a superior weapon, not an unbeatable ship, but a mirror, one that turned aggression into outcome. "You built this on purpose," Ral said. "Yes." "To end wars?" A pause. "No." That answer surprised him. "To change them." Ral closed his eyes briefly, because that felt true. "You will build more," he said,
Not a question. Yes. Better ones. Yes. Rao exhaled. Then this isn't over. A final pause. No, Varn said quietly. It's just different now. The channel closed, and just like that, it was over. The Resilience turned, not quickly, not dramatically, just left. No pursuit, no final strike, just departure, as if the battle had already served its purpose. On the Coalition flagship, no one moved for several seconds. Then, Kell spoke. "What do we report?" Rao didn't answer immediately, because what they had witnessed didn't fit into reports, didn't fit into categories, didn't fit into anything they understood. Viral spoke instead. "We report the truth." Drin let out a quiet breath. "They won't believe it." "No," Viral agreed. "They won't." Rao finally turned away from the display. "They don't have to believe it," he said. A pause. "They just have to be careful." 4 days later, the report reached High Command. It was read, reviewed, questioned, debated, and then filed. Not dismissed, but not accepted either, because accepting it would require changing everything, and institutions do not change easily, but individuals do. 6 weeks later, a Coalition patrol fleet encountered a lone human vessel, smaller than the Resilience, unremarkable. They opened fire, reflex, doctrine, habit. The engagement lasted 3 minutes. 2 Coalition ships were lost. The human vessel left intact. The patrol report contained a single line that spread faster than any official directive. Recommend extreme caution when engaging human vessels. 3 months later, Coalition fleets began to hesitate, just slightly, just enough, before firing, because somewhere in the back of every commander's mind there was a question: what happens if it learns? 1 year later, human shipyards expanded, quietly, no announcements, no declarations, but production increased. Not in numbers, in design. Adaptive systems, responsive hulls, energy processing frameworks, each one a little more advanced, a little more aware. 2 years later, war didn't stop, but it changed. Fleets no longer opened with maximum force. They tested, probed, measured, because overwhelming firepower was no longer a guaranteed advantage. Sometimes it was a mistake. Final entry, Scholar Viral. The official Coalition analysis of the Resilience engagement concluded with a statement that was circulated among senior command and quietly archived. It read, "The humans have introduced a new category of warfare, not one based on superior firepower, speed, or defense, but on adaptation under pressure." A pause in the transcript. Then, the final line. They did not build a ship to win battles. They built a ship that ensures every enemy must reconsider fighting one. Epilogue. In deep space, far beyond Coalition borders, a ship drifted. Its hull smooth, unmarked, new. Inside, systems hummed quietly, waiting, listening, learning. Because the Resilience had not been the final design. It had been the first successful one. And somewhere, a human engineer looked at a new model and asked a simple question: what happens if it learns faster?